Welcome to our 11th episode of Calling an Audible. I'm Greg Johnson, along here with my co-host Zach Greenberg. We focus on national, regional, and local sports news in this podcast with our own twists and opinions. Today we'll talk about the NCAA men's tourney, both hockey and basketball, as we'll recap briefly, the NBA, some XFL news, the NHL, and the news from around the state. So Zach, it appears that Virginia happened to redeem themselves this year.
Yeah, unfortunately, my Michigan State Spartans couldn't get it done this year. They choked once again. In my books, they should have been the favorite to win. But congrats to Virginia and Texas Tech on an amazing championship game. Texas Tech blew it in overtime, though.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing to look at is how many times Virginia went into overtime, or they had to come back from a deficit with under 15 seconds left. I think the Elite Eight, the Final Four, obviously the championship game. I can't remember if the Sweet 16 they had to go into overtime, but either way, they had a lot of close games that they had to come back and win. And I don't know if you believe in destiny.
Yeah, I mean, after they were upset by UMBC in the first round, it was clear that Tony Bennett hadn't done a very good job preparing them for that tournament. They probably kind of looked at them as a 16 seed. They've never won before. We can just take the gas off the pedal and we'll be fine. But this year they clearly learned from their mistakes, and that amazing coaching, I think, is what contributed to them being able to pull out all those overtime games, being able to come back with 10, 15 seconds left and doing all that they did. And just want to talk about Kyle Guy, who just went crazy the whole tournament. He punched their ticket to the Final Four. He was a big reason why they won in the Final Four and in the national championship.
With the infamous questionable penalty on that three-pointer.
That was definitely a foul.
Yeah,
whether you
really
call
was.
that, with that amount of time left on a three-pointer that's going to decide the game.
But he still got to hit all three free throws, which he did.
And he did. And that's amazing in itself. Down 2 points with that kind of pressure on you, with all of North America, the whole world watching you. It takes ice in your veins, that's for sure.
Has he officially declared for the draft yet, or is he going to return?
No, he's going to go back. And he has, I think he's only a sophomore, so he's going to have his junior and senior year still. And then,
if he wants to.
Yeah, but I don't know. Those guys are a dime a dozen anyways once they reach the NBA. So
yeah, he's just another 3-point shooter.
Yeah, you look at Doug McDermott, who went crazy at Creighton for so many years, and
Nick
he's just kind of
at his 1 year at Michigan.
Yeah, they're just
2 years
okay players now in the NBA. So a whole different game there.
Did you see that Cam Reddish also declared for the draft?
Yeah, that's
a bit surprising on my part because Trey Jones opted to stay at Duke.
I think that's the best move for Trey Jones because
he would have been like a second-round pick.
Or maybe a late first or something.
He'd
like
been
that.
Like his brother Tyus, but I think him going back to Duke
and
is
he'll
good.
be able to develop for one more year, and then he'll get the chance to go, and then he could be a top pick in next year's draft. That's for sure.
I'm just surprised Cam Reddish, after how much he struggled this entire year.
Yeah.
I'll go to the draft, and he's going to be I think he's going to be a 7 through 11 pick.
Yeah. I mean, he'll get picked high, and he's going to get paid, and I think money talks in the end because, if he goes back, has an even worse year.
Yeah, he's second rounder,
and then you're looking at way less of a signing bonus.
He was a 5-star recruit out of high school.
And he's looking at a big signing bonus for sure. So,
and there's
for him,
you're right. And there's rumors swirling around the NBA that they're going to get rid of the one and done rule, lower the 19 age to 18 by I think the 2020 draft or the 2021 draft.
That's also the right move.
Yeah, it's time because there's only a handful of players drafted out of high school anyways.
Yeah, and then college basketball will become a lot more competitive too. I mean, it's competitive enough because of the tournament. It's a crapshoot of who's going to really come out at the top every year.
Yeah, because Duke was heavy favorites to win.
And we beat them.
You did. Team ball beats that kind of ball.
Yeah.
The excessive talent and just freak athletes. That's just
now
the way
they're
it is.
losing them all, so we'll see how they do next year.
It really is, but moving on, Magic Johnson is officially out as the Lakers GM in a very interesting series of events that he abruptly just left. Didn't even tell owner Jeannie Buss or general manager Rob Pelinka. What's your take?
All right, well, Magic I've always been a big fan of Magic Johnson because, one, he's the greatest Michigan State basketball player ever, top 5 NBA player all time, and generally a very nice, easygoing, charming guy. I've met him in person at a sports dinner back in Winnipeg. He shook my hand. Very, very gracious person. He donated a lot of money to the community back home. So he's a great person. But I did lose a lot of respect for him not being able to look like a 90-year-old woman, the owner of the Lakers, in the eye and tell her, this is not for me. Like, I want to step down. And that, that rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. I thought he had a little bit more class than that. How old is she? Did you just look it up?
She's 57.
She's only 57?
Yeah, she ain't no 90.
Wait, how old was her husband when he died? What was his name? Roger?
It might have been. I will find out in briefly 1 second.
But
he
back to my
wasn't
point.
a young guy, but yeah, anyways.
Yeah, he probably married a much younger woman, but back to what I'm saying about Magic, good for, he tried it out with the Lakers. He was definitely not qualified for that position, I say. He really just got that position based on his merit with the Lakers and, his likability and things like that.
Yeah.
There was obviously a lot more qualified people for the position of president and CEO out there. And, the Lakers weren't doing very well. And, that was probably a sign for him that he needs to step down. He can go focus on his family, go focus on his advocacy. He's doing so many other things other than being a president and CEO. It really just seemed like a side job to him.
Yeah, and that's kind of what the reports are saying. Adrian Wojnarowski is reported to say that since he took over president of the Lakers, Magic Johnson never fully committed to the job. He is often found traveling away from the team.
Yeah, he was not at half the games.
Yeah, he wasn't even in the office. He didn't do a lot of scouting, and running an NBA team, that takes a lot of time and energy.
That's a full-time job. And, obviously he has a lot of other things on the go with all that he's doing. But
yeah,
if you're the Lakers, you want somebody that is fully
there for
invested.
the team, 100%, absolutely.
But this poses the question: do you think LeBron had anything to do with this?
I don't think so, because from my understanding, LeBron went to the Lakers in part because of Magic Johnson's recruiting pitch.
Yeah,
LeBron believed in what Magic was preaching. Mm-hmm. He was all for it, and even LeBron was shocked when Magic stepped away. So that tells you that LeBron obviously didn't have any hand in it, or they're just playing really good face right now. But it's clear that I don't think Magic wanted to fire Luke Walton and the coaching staff. I think that was part of the reason.
Do you think they deserve to be fired, though?
No. I don't think any coach LeBron's fired deserved to be fired. I mean, look at Ty Lue, David Blatt, although I think he actually kind of did deserve it because coming from Euroball to the NBA takes quite a bit of an adjustment. I mean, not as much as people would think, but still a big enough sizable difference. But I don't know. David Blatt did a lot of good things with Cleveland before LeBron got there, but I think it's really hard to play with LeBron, and he's convinced that stars will want to play with him. And I really don't think so, because he doesn't really keep much for coaches. I'm surprised Eric Spoelstra stayed still at Miami, even after LeBron. But one final thing to close out the Magic Johnson topic was Magic was quoted saying, "I want to go back to having fun." He wants to go back to being who he was before taking the job. So, I mean, he is clearly obvious that there's one point where he wanted to congratulate Russ on one of his statistical milestones he made during the season, but he couldn't because of tampering issues. So that's probably a lot of the reasons, because he likes to be on Twitter. He likes to talk a lot about two other players. And to be completely honest, the NBA has a lot of restrictions on what you can and cannot say on Twitter.
Yeah.
Especially when in regards to talking to other players.
Right. And, and he was upset that he couldn't, shout Dwayne Wade out and things like that, mm-hmm. for their and Dirk out for their last games and stuff like that. And, I just, I don't think he did it in the right way, but for him, obviously he needs to do what's best for him. So good for him for realizing that and ending the relationship before, the Lakers end 15th in the West.
Yeah, exactly.
But we'll talk a little bit more about some NBA. Dirk Nowitzki and Dwayne Wade have played their last games as NBA basketball players. In Wade's last home game, he dropped 30. And in his last game in general, it was an away game. He had a triple-double, his first triple-double of the season. And Dirk Nowitzki, we kind of figured he was going to retire, but he never officially announced it until following the Mavericks' last game and the last home game. He drops 30 points. And
Classic Dirk.
Classic Dirk. And, he didn't do much of that all season this year. He was pretty much a bench warmer. Like, when I went to the Mavericks game, he maybe got 10, 15 minutes in that game.
Oh, he's old.
And he's old. And the dude's like, what is he, like 42 now, 43? But
at least 41.
But then there was another interesting thing. In their last regular season game in San Antonio, he was shooting free throws, and the San Antonio fans started chanting MVP to him while he was shooting free throws. So I thought that was
little Texas love right there.
Yeah, it was kind of a nice gesture from the Spurs fans. But probably the best fans in the NBA, but I'm biased because I'm a Spurs fan. But
you're a Spurs fan?
I'm a Spurs and Raptors fan.
You Canadian.
I have like one team in the West, one team in the East. Is that allowed? I think that's allowed.
Canadians, I tell you. Can't have one favorite team. You got to have two. Two for hockey. Obviously, you have to have the Packers for football.
Yeah,
no,
I don't like anybody else but the Packers. So I don't like an AFC team.
For now.
Unless Brett Favre comes out of retirement and joins a team, then it's all in on the Packers.
Obviously.
But Dirk ends his career with 31,560 points, which is 6th all-time. And then Dwayne Wade finishes with 23,165 points, which is 29th all-time, but he also played in far fewer seasons than Dirk.
Yeah. I think Dwayne Wade had a lot more injury issues than Dirk.
He definitely
did. So that probably is a contributing factor.
Wade was a 3-time NBA champion, 13-time All-Star, All-Star Game MVP, 8-time All-NBA. Dirk ended with 1 NBA championship, 1 Finals MVP, 14-time All-Star, and 12-time All-NBA. So both with amazing careers. Both have been a pleasure to watch over the years, and wish them the best in retirement.
Absolutely, me too. It's tough to always see legends go. You always wish they always stayed, but, time is of the essence and they move on. So to wrap up the NBA, we're going to do our playoff predictions for them as the playoffs officially start and within a couple days. We have the Warriors facing the Clippers, and this is all in the West. The Rockets versus the Jazz, the Trailblazers versus the Thunder, and the Nuggets versus the Spurs. Who do you have going through who, Zach?
So obviously the Warriors are going to beat the Clippers. That'll probably be a 4-0 series. Rockets and the Jazz. The Rockets surprisingly ending as the 4 seed. I actually see the Jazz upsetting them here.
Okay.
I think Donovan Mitchell has just been going crazy, and they got Rudy Gobert. They've got a good team over there, and James Harden can't do it alone.
No,
I don't think so. I think the Jazz might win that in 7.
I think that's going to be a 6 or 7 series, too.
I think the Thunder will also upset the Trailblazers. I think Paul George is just going to go crazy.
There's a lot of hate between those two franchises.
And I hate to say it, but my Spurs are going to lose to the Nuggets. That's just how it's going to be.
Yeah. No question there.
But so that's it for the West. What do you think about the West?
I agree with you on all the picks we made. I think Oklahoma is going to win in 5 games against the Trailblazers.
Damn. 5?
I just think with Paul George and Russ, and that's just
especially
tough to beat.
in the playoffs, and they got Steven Adams for defense and rebounding.
Yeah, that playoff basketball, it's like hockey. Playoffs are a different breed.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's going to be Golden State versus Oklahoma because Denver's not going to beat Oklahoma, I don't think. So with that, it's going to be Golden State in the championship again. And then we're going to go switch over to the East here. We have Milwaukee versus Detroit, Boston versus Indiana, Philly versus Brooklyn, and Toronto and Orlando. Obviously, Milwaukee and Toronto are going to move on. I think Boston's going to beat Indy in 6 or 7. This is going to be another long series.
Yeah, I see all of the top seeds winning in the East, for
East
sure.
is definitely not as stacked as the West. But conference finals for me, it's going to be Milwaukee and
Golden State.
For conference finals for the East, it's going to
be
for the East conference finals. Milwaukee versus Toronto, with Milwaukee winning in 6.
I have the opposites. I have Milwaukee and Toronto, with Toronto winning in 6.
Kawhi.
The Bucks have the Bucks struggle a lot playing Toronto, so they I think that the finals will be the Warriors versus the Raptors, and the Warriors will of course win. But if somebody can beat the Warriors, then I think the champion's going to come out of the East. But I don't see anybody beating the Warriors. So
Crazier things have happened.
yeah,
Put it that way.
it's going to be a close battle for everybody else. But you know, when you have these super teams, it's tough to have an alternate champion.
Yeah. But we're going to move on to some XFL news because, you know, with the AAF folding, we have something more forward to look to in terms of spring football, I believe. And the XFL is going to give 1, 2, and 3-point options for extra points. And this is off of USA Today. So it's like rock and jock football. I'm not sure how much everyone is familiar with the XFL. I think it's going to start in 2020. And the rules are going to be somewhat similar. I'm trying to figure out where they're going to get all their players, if they're just going to take over the AAF rosters. You know, I could see that, having those basically 5th, 6th stringers just playing some spring ball. But the 1-point conversion will have the ball placed at the 2-yard line. The 2-point conversion will have the ball placed at the 5, and the 3 will be placed at the 10. And supposedly this is fun and innovative and exactly what we thought the XFL would do. I guess that's the USA Today's version of fun football. They were fun and innovative the first time around, supposedly, and there's no reason to change anything this time. You know, the article's got a lot of decent points to make, and they're trying to add more strategy to football. I'm not sure how much more strategy you need.
I mean, that in itself is you don't really need much more, but anything to like separate themselves from the NFL is, I think, a good way to do this.
Yep, and the field is condensed, which means there's a lot less space when it comes to covering opponents. I guess I myself am not too familiar with how the XFL used to be. Was it like 8 people, 9 people?
No, it was. Was
it 11?
It was the same, but the thing that was cool about the XFL that I thought was the way they decided who gets the ball to start the game.
Oh, they do rock, paper, scissors?
No, what they did was they like had 2 players. Usually they were DBs or wide receivers. They would line up on a line, and then they would have it would be called the scramble to start the game, and then they would have a ball. And whoever got to the ball first and picked the ball up, they would start the game with the ball.
They started a football game like a recess game, a dodgeball?
Right. They would have the ball like 10 yards away from them, and then they would just both sprint, and whoever gets the ball first
How many
gets to start
head-to-head collisions were there?
Probably quite a few, but you know, they weren't really thinking about that 20 years ago. So now they're probably thinking about that a bit more. But, you know, you see what Vince McMahon has done with WWE and how much innovation he's put into that.
Yeah.
So if he can get it right with the XFL this time, we could see it, you know, not obviously right now, but long term, if people start enjoying the Spring Football League more than the NFL because of all the innovation it puts in, it can, in the long term, it could really pose a threat to the NFL. So
it definitely could be, especially if it's fun football.
Right, and that was the thing with the AAF, why it sucked, is because it was literally the same as NFL football. It was just worse-looking teams, worse-looking colors, worse-looking logos, worse-looking names. And it was just like a low-quality NFL. And I think that's why they lost so much money and they didn't fill the stands, was because people just didn't care. Like, people would rather go watch a basketball game or a hockey game and things like that. So
yeah, but I get your point with that, and I expect great things out of the XFL. I really do. So I think they will.
Let's move on to our NHL playoff predictions. And
as playoffs have started before the recording of this episode, we currently have Dallas leading Nashville 1-0, St. Louis on top of your hometown Jets 1-0.
Yep.
Calgary leads Colorado 1-0. San Jose is 1-up on Vegas. The Islanders are up on the Pens. The Capitals are up on the Hurricanes. And then Toronto and Columbus are beating Boston and Tampa, respectively. Personally, I thought that Columbus coming back from a 3-0 game to beat Tampa 4-3
pretty impressive.
I think that's going to be if Tampa doesn't win this game, they're done.
Well, right, and I think that goes the same for the Jets. If as much as I hate to say it, I'm wearing my Jets hat right now.
It's ugly, too.
It's beautiful.
No,
but,
it's disgusting.
You know, they're going to have those whiteout parties in Winnipeg tonight, and hopefully they'll be partying tonight, because if they go down 2-0 to the Blues at home and the Lightning go down 2-0 to the Blue Jackets at home, that might spell the end for them, and which would be bad for me in my prediction, because my Cup final is the Tampa Bay Lightning versus the Winnipeg Jets.
Naturally.
But you know, I guess we'll see how things go tonight. But I have the Lightning beating the Jets in 7 in the Stanley Cup final. But
I have San Jose versus, and you're gonna love this one, the Islanders.
The Islanders?
They're gonna take down Pittsburgh, and they're gonna ride that through Washington. And you know, then all they got to do is beat Toronto.
Yeah, I mean...
And that's only going to fuel the fire because the John Tavares situation. I'm not sure if you saw that clip where that guy went off on Tavares when he was in the penalty box.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people saw that. And it's just going to be great redemption because it's going to be in your face, John, you left for Toronto to go win a cup, and psych, the Islanders are going to win it the year you're gone.
Well, that's you think they're going to win the whole thing?
They will. I think the Islanders will beat San Jose. And
with no playoff experience?
None whatsoever. Complete dark horse.
Well, I wish you luck with that prediction, but, I mean, it's looking more right than my prediction right now. So, I mean, there's always that.
You know, obviously it's going to be a little biased because we already have 1-0 scores in every series. But, you know, I also think that there's a President's Trophy's curse going on in every playoff. Because I can't remember the last time the President's Trophy team won the Stanley Cup.
Right, but when was the last time a President's Trophy team was that much better than everybody else in the NHL? Because the Lightning, I think they ended up having like 20 more points than the next closest team.
They had 62 wins, you know, and there's a lot to say about that because they tied the most wins ever for a franchise in a season.
Yeah, they had 128 points to end the season. The next closest team in the East was the Bruins, and they had 107. So they had a 21-point advantage by the end of the season on all teams in the East. And then in the West, same thing. The Flames had the best record in the West with 107 points. So
just because you have the most points doesn't mean you're the best team.
Absolutely, I agree. But they were just so much leaps and bounds better than every other team in the NHL this season. So
you're right,
kind of like the Warriors in basketball.
Yeah, but Zach, they're gonna choke.
Yeah,
they're choking.
I mean, right now they are. So
I mean, we'll see if they bounce back. I think they play tonight.
Yeah, tonight you have the Blue Jackets and Lightning at 6, Penguins and Islanders at 6:30, Jets and Blues at 8:30. And then the Golden Knights and the Sharks at 9:30. So 4 games to look forward to tonight.
I'll be sure to watch a couple of them as the Minnesota Wild are also at home on their couches watching what should have been. But, you know, it's the Wild. We're over that. I'm going to save that for another season. So as we're talking about the Minnesota Wild just now, the NHL lottery draft was taking place a couple of days ago, and I don't have a great opinion on how this lottery plays out because they have 2 separate picks, one for the top 3 and then one for everyone else to get into the top 3. The Minnesota Wild were originally slated to have the 11th overall pick, but they dropped down to 12 because, and get this, the Chicago Blackhawks, with their 2.5% chance to get into the top 3, got into the top 3.
Move up 9 spots.
Yeah. The only thing I'm happy about is the fact that Colorado had the number 1 overall pick via Ottawa because they had the worst record. They dropped down to 4. You know, and I'm pretty happy with that because I hate Colorado a lot more than Chicago. I cannot stand Colorado.
It's interesting as a Wild fan that you dislike Colorado more than Chicago.
I mean, they're both right neck and neck.
Yeah, I mean they're all rivals, but
the thing is, Colorado plays way more dirty.
Yeah, I feel that.
And when Andrew Brunette won the series in Game 7, I think is 2002, and then Niederreiter did it again like 8 years later. Mm-hmm. That was just the most relishing moments I've ever experienced as a Wild fan. Obviously, I wasn't quite old enough to understand hockey when I was like 5 when they first beat the Avalanche in a series, but, you know, that's just how it goes. And I don't know if the NHL... There's been talks about the NHL draft getting overhauled. One option was you have your worst 4 teams automatically get the top 4, and then all the other teams have to then play their own mini playoff to get the picks after that.
That would be awesome to watch.
Because obviously you're
kind of like the toilet cup.
Exactly. It's just like who's the best of the worst, you know? And you know, I'm in support of that because that really gets rid of the tanking aspect, as that's been a common theme amongst a lot of sports. You know, but you know, that's just the way it is, and maybe they'll change it, maybe they won't, but God only hopes that the Wild can actually get a decent first-round pick, unlike last year's pick where they took some fifth-round defenseman, Marcus, I think, whatever his name was. Something is just that's how irrelevant he was. I don't even know Minnesota's last first-round pick. But moving on, because I am sick and tired of talking about the Wild all the time. The Twins actually did something I didn't think was humanly possible. They ended DeGrom's ridiculous quality start streak at 26. And it ended when Mitch Garver hit a dead center home run in the second inning, I believe. And my God, Jacob DeGrom fell back to earth because they then rocked him for 8 runs, I believe, throughout 4 innings. A lot of it was stated that DeGrom didn't have his 90-mile-an-hour slider cutter or whatever. No one can figure out what it is except DeGrom himself, and he's never explicitly said what it was. But yeah, DeGrom had 26 consecutive quality starts, and he is looking to extend it to 27. And Mets manager Mickey Callaway was like, he just didn't have it today. He and Bob Gibson had it longer than anybody else ever in the history of baseball. And tonight's just one of those days. And, you know, as a former pitcher in both collegiate and semi-amateur, there are situations where some days you just don't have a feel for the ball. And there's some days where if you try and spin it, it's just going to spin. It's not going to bite. And sometimes it just doesn't jump out of your hand.
And see, that game was especially good for Twins second baseman Jonathan Scoop, who had 2 home runs in that game.
Oh, he went off, too.
For that 14-8 win for the Twins. And, you know, he's been killing for the Twins and killing for my fantasy team. So you keep it up, Jonathan, and keep it up, Minnesota Twins, because, you know, it's very early still, but 2 games back of first place in the AL Central, so...
Yep. Twins are doing some great things. I've been watching some more of their baseball games as they're being more relevant. And, you know, as a Minnesota fan, that's tough to say. But
and can we mention the fall-off of the Royals and how good they used to be, and now they start 2-10 this season?
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you go to the World Series in back-to-back years and then cap kills you because they couldn't sign Eric Hosmer, who actually isn't that great.
Maybe it was best for them they didn't sign him.
Oh, it definitely was. And Mike Moustauskas, they re-signed him, but I think the player they should have re-signed was Lorenzo Cain.
Yeah.
That's the one they should have paid. And breaking news, the Lakers officially part ways with Luke Walton.
Whoa!
Just lit up on my phone.
I just got that too.
You know, that's completely off topic, but it's...
But, you know, we have to update you as we get the updates.
Yep, so. I mean, as it's stated, I mean, we're not going to go talk...
So, is this... we can talk about this for a couple minutes now. Is this a LeBron James move?
100%. LeBron James does not like how Luke Walton runs the Lakers.
Yes.
And, you know...
You think Magic comes in and coaches the Lakers?
No, they're going to sign... I'm pretty sure Jason Kidd is the front runner.
Interesting.
I read a report about that a little bit.
You know, if I was LeBron, you know who I would hire?
LeBron.
No, well...
You wouldn't hire yourself?
Well, you can't really... You could hire yourself, but you can't really because you need somebody to, like, not be on the floor, I feel like.
Well, he's having trouble with that Space Jam,
but
too.
You know who you could sign as 2... But Dirk would never leave Dallas.
No,
but
Dirk
he could sign D-Wade.
D-Wade ain't going to coach the Lakers. He ain't going to do that. He might get the itch to be like a Jackie Moon and
why doesn't
coach.
LeBron... They could reunite in L.A. like they did in Miami, and you can have Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade be the co-head coaches of the Los Angeles Lakers. I think that's a dream world, but that would be awesome to see.
I mean, you know, that's plausible. I don't see that
ever.
I've never heard of
happen.
A tandem head coaching duo. That would be something.
It would just be LeBron hanging out with his homies, playing basketball, winning a few games.
The Banana Crew. I think they call themselves
and
the
then
Banana
one day
Boat.
Dwayne Wade will rip off his suit and have like a full uniform on, ready to go play. But we'll move on to some local news. with UMC sports. The softball team will play tomorrow versus Winona at 12-2, and then on Sunday versus Upper Iowa at 12-2. And then they'll also play on Tuesday at St. Cloud at 2-4. So 6 games in the next 3 days for the softball team. And also 5 games in the next 3 days for the baseball team. They'll be at Mary tomorrow at 1:30 and 3:30.
Actually just got moved to Watford City.
Interesting.
Because there's a lot of snow everywhere.
Yeah, there's snow everywhere. It amazes me that they still find a way to play.
I think Watford City, that's on like the far western part of North Dakota, and it's a turf field, I believe, so they just clean that off.
And then they're fine.
Yeah,
but they'll play wherever they play that game, Watford City or at Mary, they'll play at 1:30 and 3:30, and then on Sunday they'll play at noon. And then on Tuesday, they'll also be traveling. They'll go to Southwest Minnesota State on Tuesday and play 2 games at 12-2. So lots of softball and baseball action coming up over the next couple of days, and we'll be sure to cover how that went when we return next week. But do you have a side note here?
No, before we get that side note, I just also want to mention that the UMC baseball team split with the defending national champs, Augustana.
Yep. Well, and look at us UMC sports. First, the men's basketball team upsets former national champion Augustana, and now our baseball team splits with them, and it's looking good for both of those programs.
They're doing it, and you know what? That's the sky's the limit at that point.
Yeah, and it's a nice change of pace from. I
think they're picked in the bottom half of the conference standings, and currently they're in the top half, and near the top of the top at the top half. If I'm going to say top any more times, but they're up there, and they're waking people up that UMC isn't a joke of a program for many sports anymore like it used to be. But to also make our side note, our sister school UMD beat Providence 4-1 in hockey to move on to the NCAA championships. And I just looked it up to make sure and double check my facts. Denver lost to UMass.
So it'll be UMass versus UMD in the national championship.
Which I think they won 4-3.
Yeah, and it's looking like UMD is going to be the national champion once again. So
can't complain about that.
No,
Minnesota hockey.
We'll choose to support our sister school since it's not either of our sports.
Yep. But to move on, Zach, what has been on your mind and grinding your gears?
All right. Well, this grinding our gears segment, this is something that has been grinding my gears for a couple days now, as it's been slowly coming out. The Winnipeg Jets are famous for a street party, and in the arena, it's called the Whiteout. So the Whiteout, what it entails is, all the fans show up to the game, all the fans show up to the street party wearing all white, painting their faces white hats, white, everything's white. And this is to pay homage to, this has been a time-honored tradition for years, and Winnipeg's a place that has set constant records over the years for amounts of snowfall, the amount of blizzards that we have, and all of that stuff, and also to our color scheme. So to talk about what's been grinding my gears, Black Space Winnipeg is an advocacy group based in Winnipeg, and they are calling for a change to the Whiteout name, as they believe it can be triggering for people of color, and it marginalizes minorities in Winnipeg. So I have a very big problem with this, and I might be blowing it a little bit out of proportion, but the Whiteout started back in 1987. So this has been it was a tradition for Winnipeg playoff hockey for 20 years or for 10 years, and then the Jets left, and now it's a thing again now that the Jets have returned. So this has been a tradition for so long, and the fact that our society has become so defensive and they take offense to literally everything and everything, that's what grinds my gears, because this Whiteout party has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with sexual orientation, has nothing to do with religion, any of that. This is strictly a Whiteout party, and the Whiteout party itself, it doesn't exclude any specific race. It doesn't exclude anybody. Like, Black Space Winnipeg made the tweet, Jets parties will turn downtown white again, reminds us of a similar phrase started by a problematic #US politician. We need to talk about the #whiteout NHL Jets parties. This headline can carry a very different meaning depending on who's reading it. #Winnipeg, #Winnipeg Jets. So I quoted their tweet saying, a complete joke, a time-honored tradition with zero racial connotation. Just because they're talking about whiteout as a color. Whiteout is a color, yes, but the term white is not always associated with race. It's also associated with the color, which is a color scheme in our uniform. So
I mean, your hat's white right now.
My hat's white. Like, do I need to take my hat off because it's marginalizing to minorities?
That's
because it's
not
white.
For me to say.
Like, what about BIC in their they have whiteout, which gets rid of mistakes on papers and stuff like that.
Yep.
Are they going to have to change their name because that's marginalizing of minorities? Like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. Winnipeg is, to continue my tweet, Winnipeg is one of the most diverse cities in the world. Canada is the most accepting country in the world of all people, of all religion, of all color, no matter what. So my question is, why would they not focus on issues that actually matter? Because this is not something that needs attention to me, because this is inclusive of everybody. This is an event that brings the entire community of Winnipeg together. It brings business to the downtown area. Many of those businesses are owned and operated and employed by minorities, and the amount of business that it brings downtown is crazy, whether it be for restaurants, whether it be for little shops, merchandise places. All of these people and places benefit from these whiteout parties. And not to mention, to continue, all of the proceeds of the measly $5 it costs to get into the party, all proceeds, 100% of the proceeds, goes to the United Way and goes to charities. So to me, I don't understand how they can make something that's just, a cute little pun and completely blow it out of proportion and make this into something it's not, and potentially ruin everybody's good time in the city of Winnipeg. So that is what has been grinding my gears.
That is definitely a lot. And I also want to note for the fans that the whiteout started back in '87 as a Jets fans' response to the Calgary Flames' sea of red during the playoffs. And that was a time when the Jets' home colors were white, not blue as they are now, but the tradition has stuck. To me, tradition is tradition. You do not mess with what it is. And the fact that I think they're involving American politics.
Right. It makes no sense.
That situation.
We have nothing to do with them.
Today is my opinion, and this has nothing to express anything outside of me and myself, is that people are always quick to judge and slow to listen and learn and understand. Some people do their due diligence, but no one has thick skin anymore. And
none.
And they all just fight about opinions, and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but
the problem is you can't say your own opinion without hurting somebody. You have to stop yourself from speaking, and that's what bothers me.
Yep, and that's as far as I'm going to go, because I am not a huge fan of politics whatsoever.
I am, but that's not the time and place for this.
We can always make our own political talk show if we really wanted to, but, in the interest of keeping this a sports-related podcast, we will definitely move on and wrap this up here, as my thing that's been grinding my gears is the Barstool Best Bar vote was Joe Black's. They lost to the Penn State champs.
In the Final Four.
But, it's understandable that not everyone wins. But, the way their voting went out is they had poll votes, and that worked all the way up to the Final Four.
And then they changed it.
UND was ahead of Penn State for their bar by a considerable amount. I think it's 1,000 and 1,500, something like that. And then there's the poll voting's not working, so you have to do the hashtag vote. And then Penn State, definitely won by a considerable amount. Fortunately, though, East Carolina University's bar Sup Dogs beat Penn State's champs in the final match, and that made me feel a little bit better.
It avenged UND a little bit.
It avenged me. Revenge is sweet.
And Joe Black's.
But I understand that voting isn't exactly the easiest thing on Twitter. Maybe they should make a website and vote for it that way.
Yeah, that probably would have been the better move, but Barstool does a lot of the majority of their stuff through social media. So
Yep, exactly. So to move on to our wacky sports wrap up, and whenever we say wacky sports, it's almost always John Gruden and LeVar Ball. But this one is where LeVar Ball said LiAngelo is better than Zion Williamson. And wow. And this is the best part. He is quoted saying, biggest and strongest two guard in the NBA right now. This is about his son LiAngelo. Ball claimed, ain't nobody built like him at the two guard. Nobody 6'6", 240 can shoot the three, post you up, kill you. But you going to see. Oh. And he ain't no big baller. Laval says this of Duke superstar. He's a Williamson. Williamsons ain't stronger than ballers. I mean, he's got a huge sense of pride with his family. Nothing wrong with that. He loves his sons. I'm not going to tell him how to parent or coach them. But I get a kick out of how LeVar thinks that the consensus number one pick since the dude was like 14 coming out of high school. And, now he's saying his son LiAngelo, who wasn't even good in Latvia and isn't even on a G League team right now, is better than the number one pick who almost won the NCAA championship. So, food for thought. And then to finally wrap it up here, John Gruden told his GM, Mike Maycock, don't mess it up, dude. I took a lot of slings to get you 3 first-round picks. Don't mess it up. I just think that's funny because as a GM, you're not trying to mess up draft picks. Obviously. I mean,
Gruden and Mayock obviously go way back, both being guys that have been working in whatever capacity, outside of, in an unbiased capacity outside of football. So now that they're teaming up, it'll be interesting to see how they can interact with each other, because both are pretty smart guys when it comes to football, but in different capacities.
Absolutely.
Well, we just wanted to thank you here for joining us on our 11th episode of the season. Just a reminder, you can find us on Spotify, Google Play, and YouTube under Calling an Audible, as well as on our Twitter account at CallAudiblePod. We'd love for you to message us, and we can argue with you, agree with you, and see whatever we can do with your tweets. On behalf of Greg and myself, au revoir, shalom, and have a great weekend.
Calling an Audible is made possible through the assistance of the University of Minnesota Crookston Media Services Department and executive producer James Pagachnik. The views expressed on Calling an Audible are not necessarily the views of the University of Minnesota Crookston or its affiliates.